The silver-white Gulfstream 4 charter jet was idling outside its hangar at Jean Lesage International Airport. It was nearly 11 a.m., and the sounds of commercial jetliners coming and going rumbled toward the cavernous building every 2 minutes or so. Reed Bishop took comfort in the sound. Being in a strange airport was like going to church or McDonald's in a foreign land. You always knew just what you were going to find. For an FBI agent, predictability of any kind was a godsend. Sights, ambient sounds, traffic patterns, personal habits. It was all part of the baseline. It helped you realize when something was off, either because it stood out or it caused a ripple effect. So far, everything was normal. But then, there were a lot of moving parts in this operation. There was still enough time for something to go wrong. Bishop spotted the black Mercedes as it pulled around a slow-moving catering truck and sped along the service road. He squinted his 43-year-old eyes to check the tag irregularity that he'd been told about before he took off. The macron, the accent over the E, ran the entire length of the letter instead of part way. That meant the car was bona fide Canadian Security Intelligence Service. If there'd been a hijack, a substitution along the way, there was a sure way to tell. It was one less thing to worry about. The car flashed its brights. That was the second way to tell. A hijacker wouldn't have known to do that. The sun was hidden behind thickening gray clouds, making the sedan's dark windows seem even more opaque, more forbidding. A chill crept along Bishop's arms. The FBI agent spit his chewing gum to the tarmac and reached into his windbreaker for his cigarettes, feeling a pinch of guilt. He'd promised his 10-year-old daughter he would quit by her 11th birthday. That left him 2 weeks to make good on his pledge. But he'd barely managed to cut down from his usual 2 packs a day, and the nicotine gum only made him want it more. He'd have to sour the habit, follow the self-administered recovery regimen, as they called outpatient work in Alison Dearborn's deprogramming division. He remembered when they called it cold turkey. It was difficult then, and it would be just as difficult however it was dressed. Cold turkey or aversion training or hypnotherapy or whatever the hell, he would deal with it after this business was done. He promised himself. When the prisoner was airborne, he could relax a little. It had been 2 weeks since her capture. He'd practically lived in his small office on Pennsylvania Avenue since then. There had been arrangements to make, egos to deal with, rules to bend, rewrite, or ignore. And he still had his regular work to do, tracking the internal flow of information on top-secret operations and counter-espionage activities so that none of the intel went from the inside out. He lit up, aware of others on the tarmac looking at him. Smokers had become like FBI agents, acutely aware of their surroundings and who was glaring at them. He ignored them. The SOBs were breathing jet fumes, for God's sake. And they were Pakistani. Surely they were around smokers enough to not give a damn. Bishop did not know the 3 men standing beside the jet, nor had he seen the faces hidden by their balaclavas. The Pakistanis had worn the masks since he arrived at the airfield an hour ago. Dressed in black suits like corporate ninjas, they had gathered silently outside the hangar to await their prisoner's arrival. Bishop was here as a representative of FBI Internal Affairs. He was present in case human rights watchdogs heard about what was going on. He was supposed to give the transfer a veneer of international legality. It was all a public show, of course. He was partnered with Jessica Maloney of the CIA's Rendition Group 1, the waterboarding people, as they laughingly called themselves. She wasn't here to make sure the prisoner's rights were protected, and he wasn't here to make sure she was held accountable. Though he was technically in charge of this operation, another of Homeland Security's increasingly less uncommon joint cross-jurisdictional operations, professionally and ethically he felt their captive deserved whatever Maloney and the Pakistanis had planned. He took a deep pull of smoke, held it in his lungs for a glorious moment, then let it swirl from his nose into the morning breeze. He should have worn his leather flight jacket. It was chilly, even for Canada, the sky low and overcast. The damp gusts carried the smell of pines and imminent rain from the Gulf of St. Lawrence.